Hello, I'm Eagle Gardens 1 on Instagram, and this is fucking talking shit with Eagle, episode 511. Hopefully, you guys have had a great Thursday afternoon. Got a great guest tonight. Can't wait to get to know a little bit more about him. The Mindful Grower on Instagram. How you doing, my friend? You want to tell us how you're doing today, and of course, where we can find you?
Yeah, man. So I go by the Mindful Grower on IG. Handle Mindfully Rooted. Also have a website that I've recently started that I'm still trying to work on growing and things like that. Mindfullyrooted.org. Those are primarily the two places you can probably get a hold of me. I started a Facebook account, but I don't really use it. So yeah, if you want to get a hold of me, probably the easiest way is through Instagram or through my website. Probably be the two safest bets for sure. But yeah, doing all right. Just enjoying the day, and was doing some stuff in for my little indoor setup that I have, and yeah, took some clones today. Gonna pop some seeds here soon, probably within the next couple of days, and I'm flipping my tent over hopefully by tomorrow once my cycle kind of lines up with itself, and yeah, it's kind of where I'm at.
Well, what I like to do here is to find out what initially got people into cannabis and got them to where they are today. So I usually start the show off with the question, when did cannabis enter your life? When was the first time you came across cannabis, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, the first time I came across cannabis was probably my freshman year in high school. A couple of buddies had picked up like a gram of flour and we're like, "You want to try?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And the rest is history after that. I mean, yeah, I smoked throughout, like when I was a lot younger. I took a break when I was in the service. And then after the service, it's kind of when I started growing. And then after that, yeah, I've just been smoking ever since. It's been a big part of my life, making products for family members for pain relief, making creams and stuff like that for them, making RSO for some family members, a couple of pets that I've made some meds for, and then for me, it's just I just enjoy it, enjoy the experience, the aroma, all of those pieces of it. So it's here to stay. It's been a big part of my life. Something I've just kind of felt passionate about, and that really led me to how do I say this? I guess going more into a rabbit hole of fruits and vegetables production for myself. I just didn't have the space to grow all the seeds that I wanted to see all these different, expressions, and to go through all the genetics that I had, all the seeds that I, hold on to, for legality reasons and space reasons as well. So that kind of led me to starting to grow tomatoes and peppers, and now I'm growing pineapples this year, and passion fruit, bananas, like whatever I can get down here in Southern California. So I'm in a really temperate climate, so we don't get a frost, so I can typically grow stuff year round outdoors if I have the space to do it. So that's kind of, I guess, the short and sweet version of where it's gone for me. That's kind of the short and sweet.
So what strain do you remember what it was that was there a strain that you remember that it was in the first beginning stages there, or was it perhaps still in the brick era?
No, that was, I mean, it was good flour, but I definitely did have my brickweed days when I was that age. Um, but no, from what I remember of it, it was, a nice quality flour, at least the time and what my experience was at the time. Um, but no, I don't remember the name of what it was. I just know it got me ripped. That's all I remember from that time point. But I know back in those days when I was first consuming cannabis, Bull Rider was a big strain out here where I'm from. Northern Lights, Sour Diesel, those type of things were kind of around. I mean, the rest of it, I mean, whatever the guy told me the name was, at that point, I didn't really even ask. Just give me a bag of weed and I'm going to enjoy it.
So I heard you mention the service there. Thank you for your time in the service, brother. When did it turn from, like, say, the recreational, the first time, just smoking just to try to, get high or catch a buzz? When did it turn from that to actually kind of realizing that it was could be or it was a medicine?
I would say I feel like I realized that pretty early on. But just given what I was doing for work at the time, that wasn't really an option. So, I mean, that kind of played a big part into the rest of my life as well, decisions and different things like that, and kind of what's led me here to where I'm at now, what I'm doing now. Yeah, I'd say pretty early on, I realized that there was a lot of benefits to it. And I guess the more that culture kind of pushed against it, you started realizing, okay, someone's lying here. Someone's full of shit. And after that, just doing my own research into things and diving into literature and seeing my own experience with it, how that didn't match up with how mainstream, the hysteria was pushing it, and all the propaganda and things like that. After that, it's like, okay, like, you're full of crap. This isn't as bad as what you think it is. There's some value to this. And then also just seeing how it benefited and helped some family members of mine, being able to sleep, taking pain away from them. Those benefits just solidified it for me, I think. And after that, it's like, there's no stopping me from growing at this point.
So what was that first grow like? You mind letting us take a peek in there and hearing that story?
Yeah, the first grow of mine was using CFLs inside of a cardboard box that I lined with panda paper or some kind of like white reflective paper, using bottled nutrients and soil, small little plants like this big, a couple of them that we could grow, from just seeds, bag seeds, basically. And then after a couple of doing those at a buddy of mine, some guy that I'd met, gave me a plant, and it was a Girl Scout cookie plant that he gave me. And I grew that out. And after that, I realized that there was something special there. And I started seeking out more genetics. And I went from that to a converted ballast light. It was like a metal highlight that you could flip a switch to an HPS. Hung it in a closet. And then from there, moved into a tent, doing some stuff outdoors, and then back into tents and things like that. But yeah, my first grow was interesting. It was fun, man. Like I mean, the weed was trash, like in retrospect, but it was mine and I grew it. So it was special in that regard. And the people that I got to share it with loved it. And it was really nice to be able to provide something to someone that they enjoyed, that came as a part of me, that my hands went into and helped kind of cultivate and bring together.
For the most that I talk to, it's right about the time that they do start the grow process. That even though it may have been a medicine prior, it seems like that is the moment when it kind of clicks. That, hey, like you said, there's a little bit more to this than, when I started. Would you agree to that?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, once you I feel like once you start cultivating and you see it from start to finish, and you get to see the changes in the plant, and you smell like there's more medicine to the plant than actually just consuming it. That's part of like where my name and things come from as like the mindful grower. There's a lot of like mindfulness practice and meditation practice and things like that that go into cultivating, whether you realize it or not. Like, there's this act where you just kind of spend the time in your garden and the way that it makes you feel and the energy coming off the plants and the aromas that you're smelling, putting your hands in the soil, feeling that, and just feeling the energy and the vibration coming off of that. Like that's all medicine in its way, in its own way. So I feel like it goes deeper than just the consumption, but yeah, like that's when I started realizing there's something here, like the way that it made me feel, even without consuming it. Like there's a time in my life where the cultivation was more of a high for me than the actual consumption. Like I took a long break from consuming any cannabis, and just growing it just made me feel good.
I feel the same way. I've said that a bunch of times, something very similar to that. There is a lot. I think that's one of the most medicinal sides of the cannabis, to be honest with you. I think it, just as you're saying, it's every bit as, or if not more beneficial than the medicine itself. I think it, in my mind, I think there's a lot to do with it. It's just kind of runs along the lines of self-sustainability. You know, I'm doing this for myself, and but there's a lot of spirituality with it as well. I don't deny that fact either. Not at all. It's definitely, especially if you're approaching it with that mindset, uh, you will achieve greater results. I believe.
Absolutely. Not even just for the plants, but like for yourself as well. Like I feel like you'll get more out of it. If you're not enjoying it, what's the point of doing it? And a lot of us will start getting stressed out, including myself. Like I have to check myself a lot. Like I start stressing out about my other things that I'm doing, having to get stuff done with my little garden and things like that, and trying to time things. And like if you're not enjoying it, it's not serving its purpose. At least for someone that's not doing it at a commercial level. So it's like taking that time and just being mindful in what you're doing and doing things with intention, I think are really important.
I have to agree. So as you progress, you told us a little bit about the lighting changes from the beginning growth, but you want to tell us a little bit about how the practice nutrients change from 1 to 2?
Sorry, someone was making some noise outside. Will you repeat that one more time for me?
You've told us about how the growth changed a little bit, progress with like lighting, but how did it progress as, like, say, your grow style and inputs? How long were you on the bottle? How long were you on the bottle before
Yeah.
you made the switch?
Um, I was on the bottle for a little while, say a couple of years. I ran cutting edge solutions were like my main go-to. A buddy of mine turned me onto them, and I basically used their entire line, like all like 10 bottles that they had. I wanted, like, if I was going to give it a run, like I was going to give it a full run and try all of their products, how they recommended, to see what the quality would come out. And it came out great. Like I enjoyed using their products and they were awesome. But as I was once I started diving more into food production, I started realizing that there's a really big gap in my knowledge. And I'm not going to use these bottled nutrients to grow fruits and vegetables. Like it was just like, this is not cost effective. At this point, I'm not going to spend $14 to grow a tomato. Like it's just, that's just too much money. I'll just go buy it at that point. So at that point, when I started doing more outdoor food production, I started diving into more of organics and things like that. And then the more I learned about the agricultural industry and how food's produced and how nonsense some of these organic certifications are and what's allowed and what's not allowed, that started leading me more towards implementing more of a natural system, to where I just started using compost and soil and then adding some amendments and different things like that. And the bag that has the NPK numbers on it, and just pre-mixed fertilizers and stuff like that. And I did that for a little bit. And then that led me to, I really liked the concepts behind a lot of the natural farming practices, like through KNF and Jadam, not necessarily even what you can get out of it, but the ideologies behind it, and understanding it really teaches more than just cultivation, but more of like a lifestyle, and the principles that come along with it, like finding things in balance, right? Stepping away from good and bad and looking at things that just are. They just are. And we're going to work with nature with however nature presents itself. So instead of trying to kill more things, which is typically the way that agriculture kind of operates, we're going to add more of the good guys, in a sense, to give it a winning shot and outbalance anything that would be looked at as like quote unquote bad, right? So being able to even apply those philosophies to your own life, and my own ways of thinking. So it went really in line with my practice of mindfulness. So that helped me shift into that more so, I guess, ideology in a sense of trying to work with nature and understanding nature more and understanding what's in the soil. And that led me to buying a microscope and diving into that rabbit hole. And so now I have a very, I guess, eclectic style of growing in a sense, where I take a lot of principles from Jadam, principles from KNF, principles from, your standard like agronomy type stuff, where I get my soil tested and things like that, to kind of find a balance of what works for me in my current system. My outdoor food production is primarily all Jadam. Like I have probably like 15 buckets of Jadam liquid fertilizers that I have for different crops. I make JMS once every other week or every week for my garden outdoors. We hand water everything with buckets. We add, different styles of mulch and try to build the organic material that we have. We compost all of our food scraps to reduce our waste coming out of my home and my family members' home, which is where our garden's at. And really just trying to minimize our waste and close as many loops as we can to help, move the environment versus creating more of a problem or us being, an issue for it. So yeah, I guess that's kind of where it's evolved from and kind of where it's going. So at this point now, we're diving in deeper to have a better understanding of balancing soil, and making sure that our food is minerally rich. So that way, when we consume it, we can live a healthier lifestyle and have a less of an impact on the soil and the earth as a whole.
Right. I don't think you can actually travel into organics without actually doing a little bit of personal work on yourself as well, because there it is, very spiritual. The more that you get into organics, you kind of see that you're just a tiny cog in what is, the world as it is, and it's very humbling. For me, that's what I enjoy about some of the books. The One Straw Revolution was a very had Buddhism undertones that I really enjoyed. That, like you said, it taught me a few things about myself as well as gardening practices throughout the read.
Absolutely. If anybody listening, if you have not read that book, I would highly recommend it. One, because you'll understand more of how natural systems work, but also you'll learn a lot about yourself. I think it's a phenomenal read. Another book that really, I feel like is in line with that, but it's not a gardening book, but I think that really kind of shifted my thought process that's really in line with a lot of these natural farming practices, is a book called Miracle of Mindfulness by Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a Vietnamese Buddhist monk. Highly recommend that. It's a small, short read, but it'll take you a long time to read it if you read it mindfully. So if you've never checked that book out, I would highly recommend it, especially if this idea of slowing down and observing and just doing some deep dives into yourself. And I think it'd be it's a phenomenal read. I give it to people whenever someone gives it back to me, I lend it right back out to somebody else.
When I went, somebody asked me basically like the theory of mind, the fullness. I basically replied to them. Basically, what you're doing is you're observing what you're observing. So, is a good way to kind of look at life.
Yeah, I agree. It's purposely paying attention, being aware, being in the present moment. We spend so much time in the past and we spend so much time in the future, right? We worry about what's going to happen and we ruminate and are depressed about what happened. But in reality, by taking, let's say that 30% of the back end, 30% of the front end, that only leaves us with 40% of being present. So you're only living at your 40% potential if you think about it. So if you could bring yourself more into being in the present moment, you'll see more.
So would you say that most of your growing happens outdoors then? It sounds like.
The majority of my growing as a whole is outdoors, but my cannabis is grown indoors.
So what do you have in your garden currently? You want to tell us what the setup looks like now and what you got going currently?
Yeah, so I'll show you guys. I can show it to you in a bit, but I'll just kind of walk you through it. But basically, right now I'm just running. I have a 2x4 tent, of 220-gallon pots on their third cycle, and I run 4 plants in there. And then I have a little area right next to me that I have a little T5 light that I run my clones underneath. It actually just took them earlier today. So I took clones of everything and I'm going to flip everything. I have two Royal Kushes that were crossed with an OG78, and the OG78 had zero impact from, this is what I was told by a trusted source that I received it from. The OG78, all it did to the Royal was reduce the flowering time. So outdoors, it finishes in September 1st, in early October. I've smoked it and it has the same like chirp profile. The structure looks right. Everything else checks. And this thing stacks too. I'm really excited to see it. I've only grown it in a windowsill just to kind of give it a little test to see if it was actually what they were saying. And to me, at least it checked out. So now I'm actually going to give it a full run in my tent, and I have 2 plants of that. And then I've been running a lot of gear from Rebel Grown. I really enjoyed their stuff. My last run, I grew a double OG Chem that was crossed with a lemon sugar kush, and I think they called it Sugar Ray Lemons. And I grew a couple of those from seed, and I found one that I really liked, and it's been my daily smoke since. I'm almost out of it, so I'm growing it again. And I took some more cuts for my next round. And then I had, I like growing CBD plants as well, just to find a balance. So I have another one that's a lower THC level, hopefully higher in CBD. That's an orange creamsicle that was crossed with the Pina CBD cultivar. I haven't flowered it out yet. This came from a cultivator out in Maine. This thing is sturdy as all shit, man. It's crazy how this thing was bred for the outdoors. It's the sturdiest plant I feel like I've ever had in my garden. So we'll see we'll see what it comes of it. And I took some clones of it just in case I like it, or some cuts, and yeah, we'll see. And then I recently got picked up by Photon Tech. So they sponsored me with a couple of lights that I put into my grow tent. So I'm giving those a shot this round, and yeah, those things have been badass so far. So if anybody's interested in any of those, you can use Mindfully Rooted as a promo code, and that'll save you some money if you want one. I can't say if they're that great or not yet, just because this is my first run with them, but vegging under them was phenomenal. The light penetration from even just the growth at the bottom was crazy. I had to cut a lot back, just because I already know how these plants are going to grow. And yeah, that's basically my setup as of right now, but I can open this thing up and I can show it to you as well. So if you give me a sec, I'll get this thing open. You can see, I think my lights are still on.
Sure.
Give you all a little sneak peek. So these are the lights that I was talking about. These things are pretty rad. I've enjoyed them so far.
Congratulations on the sponsorship there.
Yeah, man. I'm stoked with it. I was surprised that they reached out to me, but yeah. And then this is, I'm trying to like lean this camera over. I don't know if you guys can see, but yeah, this is the little garden so far. I'm limited on space, so for me, this is enough for what I can consume. So as long as I keep a perpetual harvest going, like I'm good.
So what has been your favorite strain to grow so far?
So far, probably the Sugar Ray lemons. Yeah. The structure of it, how frosty it is, the smell of it. And I feel like even just running it from seed to clone, there's been somewhat of a shift. The leaf size is a little different. It could be, the balance of nutrients that are in the soil this time versus last time. Haven't really figured that out yet, but that's been probably my favorite one to grow as of recently. I've grown Mac 1. That was really nice to grow. It stacked really nice, but it just wasn't really my style. So I got rid of it. What else have I grown recently? There's one plant that I really enjoyed growing that I grew outdoors that I made a placard for it and I put it up on my wall just because it was something special that we grew back in 2018 by Colorado Genetics. It's a strain called Rocky Dennis. He was, that's funny. My partner just messaged me and she was like, that plant didn't even make it on the wall. Why are you talking about it? Other than that, I would say the other one that's been a really favorite of mine or of our families essentially would be Romulan by Romulan Genetics. It was a clone that I always get the name wrong of the nursery. I want to say not Dark Heart. I don't know what the name of the nursery is. Anyways, there's a nursery that has the cut, and that a buddy of mine, another veteran buddy of mine that gave it to me. And yeah, I mean, that one, just the medicinal properties of it were phenomenal. The way that it's helped me and has helped other family members of ours. That's been a fun one to grow, but that one outdoors, I did that one light dep outside with trash bags. And that was an interesting run, trying to do some light dep. Cause I had it re-veg on me the year prior. And I was like, I got to do something a little bit different this time. So we bagged up some trash bags and light depped a couple plants outside. And yeah, that was phenomenal flower for outdoor. It didn't run that well for me indoors. But I reached back out to them, that group, and they gifted me a pack of seeds. So at some point when I have a little bit more space, I want to sift through that and see if I could try to find that female again or something similar to it. Cause that was a phenomenal plant. Nice floral finish to it. Yeah, it was really nice. I don't know if you've ever had it.
I have not. Sounds by your recommendation. I should try it.
Yeah, Romulan Genetics has some good stuff. And then this is what I'm going to grow next. This is my next run. Let me pop these. I was going to do that tonight, but I'm probably going to do it in the next couple of days. Get them soaked in. And then once I harvest this out, then those will go right in and that'll be my next round.
So you soak your seeds is your process?
Yeah, I use like the KNF seed soak solution. So it's basically a maintenance solution of OHN, fermented plant juice, and vinegar. So I make my own vinegars. I make my own OHN. I find my own FPJs. I primarily use that as my seed soak. If I don't use that, or if I don't have that stuff on hand, I might even just put the seeds in my mouth and then do them that way, just to get my own microbes on there. Or I'll dip them in like fulvic acid or aloe and then put them in just to kind of give them a little bit of a start. Yeah.
I can understand, like say the fermented fruit juice or plant juice there to get them going. But where does the vinegar? How does the vinegar lie in there? You're muted.
You can't use fermented plant juice by itself. Reason being is because the sugar's too high. So the vinegar balances the sugar. It's also, you have other microbes in there like the yeast and other bacteria and stuff that are forming in there. So it just adds essentially a little bit more diversity. And then the OHN is are you familiar with OHN? Do you know what that is by chance?
I can speak vaguely of it. I'm still dipping my feet into that realm. But if you'd like to get a little deeper into it, please.
My bottle of OHN. So I sell it on my website because it takes forever to make. So people will purchase it from me because it'll take you about 3 months to make this. But basically it's 5 anti-pathogenic herbs that are fermented and then tinctured. So it's Chinese medicine, basically. It's a homeopathic medicine. Once again, that's what I meant about like how this stuff just goes really in line with my own spiritual practices. Versus reacting to a situation, you're being more proactive about it, right? Where you're eating healthy, you're consuming, high levels of minerals and things like that to keep your body moving versus reacting to a sickness, essentially. So that's kind of where OHN, I feel like, comes in, to where I drink it personally. I drink it every single day. It's a vodka tincture. So basically I have about 5 to 10 mils of vodka daily based off of like what the OHN is. And it consists of angelica root, licorice root, cinnamon bark, garlic, and did I say ginger already? No, and ginger. Yeah. So you take those, you ferment them, and then after it's fermented, you tincture them. You go through 4 to 5 extractions, and then you keep them separate. And then when you're ready to go, you mix them up. And this is already pre-mixed. So I pre-mix this for myself for basically for the year. And then the rest of it I keep separated. So that way it'll get better over time. It continues to micronize. And yeah, so I don't feel like I've been sick since I've started making this and taking this myself. So that's phenomenal. I love it. And my plants seem to like it. And I don't really deal with pests. I wouldn't say it's because of this, but I just feel like the overall system, the way that the system functions, like I haven't dealt with pests in my garden, my indoor garden, really. I mean, I deal with powdery mildew on my outdoor stuff every once in a while, like my squashes and stuff. But for the most part, like things move pretty smoothly.
So I drink a lot of kombucha. So how would you rate the OHN against kombucha? As far as like gut health and bacteria and stuff like that.
You said kombucha, right?
Yes, sir.
So the funny thing is, so that's what this is, old kombucha as well. And I actually use this as a pH down. Because it's acidic as hell. It's vinegary as hell at this point. Like this is kombucha. I make my own kombucha as well. And this is ones that went too far. And I'm like, I'm not going to drink it, but my plants will. So if I need to pH my water because my bicarbonate levels are too high and things like that, I'll use this. But basically kombucha is a probiotic. OHN is a prebiotic. So there's a lot of foods that are prebiotic that you're basically priming your gut for the microbes to excel in. And that's where essentially OHN comes in. That's a version of a prebiotic. There's other fruits and vegetables that you can consume that are considered prebiotic as well, that have those properties to them. But I can't really think of any off the top of my head. But essentially what you're doing is you're priming your system to be inviting for the new microbes to come in and settle in your stomach. And that plays a huge part into like our own mental health and stuff like that too. I mean, 95% of our serotonin is made in our gut, right? We talk about this gut feeling we have. I mean, our gut's like our second brain in a sense. So we can take care of this, but if we don't take care of this, it's going to impact this. They're connected.
I'm a believer in that as well. That's one of the first places I got stuck in in my ventures into the organics. When I got into microbes and fungus, that's where things just got deeper and deeper and deeper. You know how, basically what's going on. The soil is basically going on in our gut. Same relationship between sugars and microbes in our gut. If one gets out of control, the other gets out of control. It's really mind blowing how the two process, how we're just interlinked with everything that goes on in the soil. I mean, it's really mind blowing. Microbes, everything.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. And like the interesting piece is that, like, going back to what people say is about like the good and the bad stuff. Like, I use a lot of Jadam preps in my indoor grow too. And people are like, oh my God, you're dumping all this anaerobic bacteria. And I'm like, man, something's going to eat it. Like, I'm putting more food into my system, right? So like I make a couple of JLFs that I use. I have a comfrey JLF that I use for my system. And also make fermented plant extracts as well. Like, I wouldn't drink any of that stuff. Like my KNF stuff, all day long, I'll drink that stuff. My Jadam stuff, no, absolutely not. That would mess up my stomach.
So, what you want to take me through? What is your gardening now? What kind of soil is it? What kind of soil did you mix it yourself? What are you using to feed your plants now?
So,
Sounds like you've got a little bit of everything laying around. What are you using?
man, I got a little bit of everything. Yeah. Let's see. So my base mix was, so I don't have the space, I feel like, to mix my own soil, or even the knowledge at this point to make the soil myself, at least when I had kind of started these runs. So to make it simpler for myself, I purchased bag soil. So I was using Big Roots by the Soil King. That was my base. And then I added rice hulls to it for extra aeration. Just living where I live, the humidity is a lot higher than where I used to live. So I wanted to add extra aeration so that way my soil would drain properly. And to feed the soil, I used a bunch of different dry amendments. I'll use kelp meal. Gypsum is something I use pretty heavily. This past round, actually, let me back up. I'll use seawater. I have a gallon of seawater in my closet that I use. C90 I'll use for minerals. But my mineral content was so out of whack after this last soil test, and my sodium levels were so high that I decided to go with sulfates this time. So I use copper sulfate, manganese sulfate, and what else did I use? And iron sulfate to help balance things out. So that's kind of the base of where things kind of started. And then now this part moving forward, I wash whatever trim that I have goes right back into my soil. Like, I don't keep my trim. It goes right back in. Any of the plant materials, any of the stocks, that literally goes right back into my system. Essentially, if it came out, if I pull it out of there, I have to find a way to replenish it. So that's essentially my way of having to add less. Or if I do decide to do a wash, to make hash or something like that, I'll basically take that material, dry it out, and I'll grind it in like a blender or something, and I'll basically turn it into a meal. And then I'll top dress with that as well before my next round of flour. So the extra minerals, potassium and things like that that were built up in the flour will then get released to help the bud sets for the next following round. That way I don't put too much material at the top and just kind of suffocate everything. So just kind of slowly adding things. But going into flour, I'll probably be adding a lot more gypsum into the system. And then this particular round, I'm going to start using more Jadam preps. And I have a squash JLF that I've made and a hot pepper JLF that I made. And both of those should be higher in potassium and phosphorus and calcium than some of the other preparations that I have, like my grasses and things like that. So my hope is those pieces will essentially be what will help me build my potassium levels going into flour to help, some of the bud swelling and the bud sets and things like that. Just as I go through that cycle. So it was recommended to me to add more potassium going into flour or in the flour cycle. And I'm like, there's other natural ways that I can get it versus buying more products to add to this. So by doing a little research and figuring out what minerals are in what fruits and vegetables, I can add those in. And the cool thing is that all the JLF stuff that I make comes from my outdoor garden. So I know exactly what went into them to grow them, which essentially helps me when I go into my system, knowing that there's nothing bad in a sense. I don't have to worry about any pesticides or anything like that, or even something that's store-bought, who touched it and where it went, where it came from, or anything like that. I know it came from my garden, my soil, my microbes, going back into my system to continue feed that way. What else am I using? I use some soybean meal for my nitrogen. I like using comfrey. I have a fermented plant extract and a Jadam liquid fertilizer that I'm using for those. Man, those things are smelly. I don't recommend those for indoors, but you can do it. Just don't go too heavy on it because it will stink for a little bit. But essentially that's the nitrogen that's putrefying basically in the system. And that's kind of what you're smelling. Like my pepper, my squash don't smell really, but my high grasses and my comfrey stuff, yeah, that stuff stinks. So that I like using leaf mold a lot too. Whenever I go out hiking and out in the forest, I'll typically take a little bit of leaf mold, but before I do that, I also give an offering back to the forest versus taking. So we don't want to essentially deplete our own natural resources. So like if I'm taking a bag of leaf mold, I'm also bringing a bag of compost or my worm castings that I'm bringing in and dropping into the forest as my own offering, just to say thank you to the earth for providing those microbes for my garden and giving us, I guess, a way to give back.
So I never even thought about after my wash there to dry out my material and grind it up and give it back to my plants. I do, however, use my wash water to feed back to my plants. I usually cut it in half and then give it to my plants. My plants always seem to love my bubble water. But if I can, go full circle and dry that material out and give it back to them again and get something back out of it, well, that's something I may consider as well.
So what do you do? So question then. So what do you do with your material after you're done washing it? Where does it go?
I chuck it. Compost, basically.
Like you trash it?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. What about like your leaf material when you cut it off your plants? What do you do with it?
Same thing, trash. I should be composting it, but I would like to compost it more, but I look at it more as a more of a kind of a giveaway. I've got more cannabis scent floating around on the outdoors that may be inviting, or wind may pick it up at the wrong time. So I'll try to all the waste I try to keep away from the house.
That makes sense. I mean, one thing that I found easy to do, and this is if you decide you want to try to do something with it, I'll show you what it looks like. So, I mean, this is what it essentially comes out to. This is, if you guys can see that, but this is the meal. This is the flour. This is it. And I just have it in a little bag, and now I can take this and top dress with it as any other amendment. Or turn it into a JLF, put it into a bucket with water and leaf mold, and the shit decomposes completely. And then feed this back into your plants as part of your veg solution, right? Every mineral that the plant needs is in the material you're chucking. So you might be able to cut down on your nutrients that you're using or whatever your grow style is. And it's right here.
I told myself this was going to be the year that I got my earthworm bit going, but one through life's ups and downs and bumps, the earthworm bed got bumped in the process, but it's not a dream I'm giving up on.
No, I have a little worm bin. Damn, it's like all show and tell. I have a bunch of stuff that I pulled out, but I have basically one of these containers that I basically have as a worm bin. It's a small little 5-gallon tote basically, and I have a couple stacked together, and that's my worm bin. I'll throw leaf molds in there, throw my leaves in there, my stalks in there. But I primarily, because I don't pull my root balls out or anything like that. I just throw the material right back on top. Like, I mean, even when I was trimming everything up today and cutting everything out, I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's just sitting all right here on the top. And over time, probably in the next like week or two, that'll all decompose and go away. And it'll be gone. The worms will eat it. And that's extra nitrogen and calcium and everything else that's going to go right back into my system. It's essentially how nature does it, right? Like all the leaves fall and nature has this huge reserve at the top of the soil, above the soil. That's just all this organic material that can't get washed away, right? The rain will wash all the soluble nutrients through, but all these nutrients are being held above the soil as essentially as a reserve. So as these decompose, they slowly start releasing stuff back into it. So if you're growing in a bed, if you're growing in something that you're going to be recycling going over and over again, it makes sense to just keep that material in there. Because it's less stuff that you're going to have to put in. If not, you're going to have to buy something to replace it with. So it's just ways for me to, my biggest thing is I try to reduce as much waste as I can and try to use as minimal inputs as I can. To cut my costs down as much as I can. And because I mean, electricity where I'm at is stupid expensive. So that already cost me an arm and a leg to even run the electricity that I run. So if I can cut my expense down on everything else, like, yeah, I think it's kind of where it's at for me.
If we can cut costs at any corner, I'm right there with you. And it's weird how, again, I see this over and over as cannabis growers. You know, we're trying to look out for the plant, go to kick ourselves off the pile, go to dip our feet in organics, and then as we venture down the road through organics to try to have healthier plants, we see how it can relate to a better us. Then we start adapting what we've learned in the cannabis world and applying it to our veggie gardens, and ultimate learning, like you said, how we can lessen our footprint altogether and as a steward, here on the earth. And it's a slippery slope. I jokingly said this. A bit more heavier. I was back 100% in cocoa. Cocoas and salts. You know, I had been back and forth over the years from like cocoa, peat. I started out in soil because I was up in like an attic space and weight mattered. It was one of the initial reasons why I switched to a lighter medium and got away from kind of the organic side of things. But moreover, as I went along, it was like to try to get away from pests and stuff like that, keep a more sterile environment. And then this time last year, I kind of I started in a for one reason or another, something in my life kind of sent me down that path. And then as I started doing the show and started hanging out, he kept talking more and more about the organics, and I kept fighting him. Like, no, I'm not going down that road. I'm afraid once I open that rabbit hole, it's just going to be so deep. I'm going to be full hippie before it's all said and done. And I fell into the rabbit hole. I fell into the rabbit hole, and it's as deep as I thought it would be. And but I bet at this point I'm proud to have fallen into the hole, but it is a very deep hole. I haven't even scratched the surface of what's in the organics rabbit hole there.
Yeah.
But
So what's your primary grow method? I don't know. Like, I didn't know too much about the show when you had reached out. This is my first time really chatting with you, so I'm curious. Like, what's your grow style like? What do you? So you stepped away from using? Are you so you've more so doing organics now, or is that something that you're still shifting into? Or
no, I've pretty much made the transition. I'm all in soil these days. I'm to the point where I will be trying more to reuse, but it's that old school grower in me trying to, that gets is still getting rid of soil here and there. It's is it depleted? Is it full of stuff that I don't want in the garden? I'm still dealing with that aspect of it. But yeah, pretty much full soil now. What kind of set it off was Mr. Smiley's Gardens. We got talking a little bit back and forth, and he was like, "Hey, if I set you up with a couple earth boxes, would you be willing? Would you be willing to give it a go?" Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then time came, we bumped into each other, and he was like, "Ah, I got them earth boxes. Are you ready?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they kind of hung out for a minute or so, and you get me started yet? No, 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 no. I'm sorry. He's like, don't let him dry out. Don't let him dry out. All right, all right. He sent me with, yeah, seriously, it was the complete hookup. It was the boxes full of soil, everything I needed. He sent me with earthworm castings, top notch earthworm castings, and, top cover, all the good stuff. And so I took them home. They did sit for about a week and a half. I put them together and did a side by side, all the same strains. And my girls, the jelly bean, and some 10-gallon chunky cocoa, which was damn near wood chips, and run it with salt. And then I put same girls in their boxes, and they they blew the doors off that chunky cocoa, to be honest with you. Everything that I'd come to think about organics, that it was going to be a slower method uh in growing, but a better, you know what I mean? You're getting quality versus low speed. It wasn't that. The organics was kept up step for step with the cocoa. And I got bushier plants, better plant structure, more branches. I mean, it was hard to fight side by side. The yield was better taste. So that was kind of an eye opener that, maybe maybe I should be switching. So eventually, little but I eased deeper and deeper into the soil. Now everything's pretty soil. But the earth boxes are still around. Although I don't veg in the earth boxes. I'd still plant in them, give them a couple weeks. And them earth boxes, I haven't pulled them apart. I just kind of dig out where the old plant was, and then I plant next to it. So basically, I'll go 2, 1, 2. That's been the process 5 times in that box, and they're still doing great.
Look at you
You know,
recycling soil. Good for you, man.
I'm learning. I'm learning.
Yeah, I
So
think that's a big piece. I feel like throwing out like you put so much work into building the soil ecology. To me, like I would cringe if I had to throw my soil away. Um, like I put so much work into building the levels of fungus and building the bacteria diversity and all that in my soil that even if I were to recycle it, like there's so much life in there that things will break down so much faster. Like I can top dress and the things will become available quicker than if I were to add it to newer soil because the life is already there. And if you can find a way to not have to rip the whole plant out and you put it in big enough containers, like you were saying with the earth box, right? Where you're kind of like interchanging your planting style. You have this root ball that's already built from one of the plants that has this symbiotic relationship with other microbes already. And when you plant into it and these roots come out, I mean, they're just going to migrate right to it. And then now you have this root ball in there that's filled with carbon, being one of the most important, I feel like, pieces of life, right? Like we're all made out of carbon. The plants need carbon to cycle out of their properties and essentially build. And you're basically putting food right next to them for them to just start extracting. So I think there is some truth to what you were saying before. It's like, it can be a little slower for some of these bigger processes, things to break down in the soil. But I mean, it doesn't have to be, right? There's a lot of things that we can do nowadays that we can make a lot of these nutrients available, whether it's we're putting them into a tea and having the microbes breaking it down, but essentially we just need the microbes to process the material to make it readily available. So as long as we have a strong set of biology in our system, I mean, the rest of it should get taken care of. And it'll lay this nice buffer down to you to where you don't have to really worry too much about pH. Like I also add sulfur to my system as well to help drop the pH if it's getting out of control. Because once my calcium depleted, my potassium levels were really high and my sodium levels were high, and my pH went through the roof. So once I was able I added more sulfur or more gypsum to it to start washing some of that stuff through, everything balanced out. So my pH in my soil sits at about 6.6 or 6.6. So at this point, like my tap water comes out at about 8.5. So I can add a little bit of kombucha or vinegar to it to drop the pH to help with the bicarbonates and then put that right in. And I don't have to really worry too much about my pH levels because my soil itself will balance it. So it just makes less work for me.
Well, another thing I found out in this little experiment, you know, when when I was always thought about organics or taught about organics, I was always told that you kind of wanted to put that plant in its home as early as possible so it can stretch out and do its thing. So that was one of the big holdbacks for me as because I'm a perpetual gardener here as well as a caregiver. So, there's everything's got to be in a clockwork type setting where I am kind of they're on my schedule more than they are theirs, if you will. So and I'm limited on space. So I couldn't take all of the plants that I need to have and put them in their 10-gallon pots and from babies and then let them do their thing. You know what I mean? That would be a lot of space. So I kind of thought that would be hindering my growth style. But what I found out was with the soil, it kept up with the up pot method of letting them stretch and then kind of roughing up the roots, putting them in the 3, letting them go, rough them up, put them in the 10. It was every bit as fast still as the cocoa. I couldn't believe it. That was the thing. I was like, well, heck, if it can keep up like this, it's a no-brainer at this point. It's time for a full switch. And
Yeah,
it was at that point.
I'll use like the 3 inch by 3 inch little cubes. I mean, if I have one around here somewhere, like I'll basically use like these little guys. I have little carrots coming out of here right now, but I'll basically use like these little guys, and then I'll up hop from this into a half gallon or a 1 gallon. And then when I need to, like I'll top dress with a little bit of just like a mixed fertilizer bag to get a little bit of extra food for them if I need to stall them out. But because those, like same thing with space, like I have to wait till my whole tent's done before I can even move my stuff back in, because I'm super limited on space. Like this room, it's like I have this little area here and I have a little staging area next to me, and other than that, like that's really about it. So if I run out of space, like if the plants get too big, it's going to hurt me. So in this regard, like I can keep them small, keep them in 1 gallons and keep them fed and nice and healthy and happy. And then when these are done, boom, make that switch and pop them in. And yeah, same thing where I disturb the roots, I break the bottoms up a little bit, shake their shoes off, and then make a little hole next to the old stock that was coming up. And within a cycle or two, I can literally twist the old stock and pull it right out. And then for the next cycle, I can plant right in where the old plant was. So exactly with what you're saying, right? It's like it kept up. I don't have any experience running straight cocoa. Even from when I first started growing, I was using bottled nutrients in soil because that's what what I thought made sense to me, which looking back at it, it doesn't. But at the time, that's how I started using bottles in like Fox Farm Ocean Forest soil.
So any tips on like, say, if I'm gonna start reusing it at some point, it's gonna have to be in a method like I'm talking to where I can up pot and up pot and up pot. It'd be difficult for me to just reuse these same 10 gallons just for space reasons. So is there any tips for me as I, take them pots apart and knock up the root ball for storage purposes? Should I be leaving as much of that root in there as I can, even in the storage from, now to then? And what can I do? Can I be adding something micro to help the microbes sit as it sits? So when I
Yeah, I mean,
juice it back up,
there's a couple of things you could do depending on like how big of a stock you have of soil, like getting that you're a caregiver and things like that. Like if you have like a mound of soil, my suggestion would be just pile it up, keep doing what you're doing, but pile it up and then mix it up and send it out for a test. And then get that test back and then make your amendments, make your changes that you need that way. In regards to microbes, I mean, you could add stuff like bukashi to help break some of those things down, right? All the lactic acid bacteria will outcompete most pathogens that you may have in there, or anything that's opportunistic. Or if you want to take it a step further, go collect some IMO and take that stage all the way to step 3 or 4 and then inoculate it with that. And that'll really help get things moving as well to keep things nice and happy. So I think it kind of just depends on, I guess, your system, but like you could also just dust it off and reuse it, right? Like if in veg what type of nutrients you typically have to add into your system, we'll just add those in a raw form, right? So you're more than likely going to have to add nitrogen. You're more than likely going to have to add calcium. You're more than likely going to have to add some level of minerals, whether it's like C90 or basalt or azomite or something. Shotgun approach, man. Unless you want to get the testing done, and just throw some things in like that. That would be my suggestion. at least to start with it, and give it a side run, right? Test it out and see how it works for you. But it's a resource that you have, and I feel like it's valuable. Man, if I lived next to you and you were saying, "Hey, I'm throwing all this soil away," guess what? I'm picking all that shit up in a truck and I'm bringing it to my house.
Well, in my defense, it hasn't gone completely to waste. No,
That's good to know.
I live up here in northern Michigan, so when I bought this house, I actually live in here on National Forest, and it's all pine trees around. So the kind of lawn that I had when I first moved up here was that spotty pine kind of grass where it little bit here, a little bit here. I'd say 95, yeah, 95% of the yard was sand when I came in. And I've been here 5 years, and through the recycling process, if you will, I now have a lawn that I probably wouldn't have achieved if it wouldn't have been for a grower and chucking out some root balls and throwing some seed on it right away. I would probably be still a 90% yard full of sand. So it hasn't went completely to waste.
Perfect. There you go. So that alone right there is the proof in the pudding for you to let you know that nothing bad was there. There's nothing but good stuff. Look what you made, right? If it would have been a bunch of bad stuff, it would have probably fried and nothing would be growing there. You got a good resource there, man. And I mean, you could even add, depending on like if, like I have worms in my system as well. And if too many things start turning into castings and it starts getting kind of sopping wet, you could add things like rice hulls or more pumice or more things like that for aeration. Just kind of give it that feel and see what you think. Is this a consistency that I like working with? And if it's not, add a little bit more aeration to it, add a little bit of compost to it. You could even bury bokashi scraps into it and get a little bucket all of your waste material and bury that into that pile. And then that way you can put your leaf material and all of your waste stream basically and put that all to use. It might take some trialing and things like that, but I mean, there's a lot of resources that I feel like that can be utilized that a lot of people tend to overlook in a sense. So we get worried that something bad might come of it. Like my entire tent or my grow areas they're not sterile whatsoever. I'm spraying compost teas in this thing. I'm throwing microbes all over the place. I'm surprised there's not mushrooms growing out of my floors, to be honest. And I haven't seen powdery mildew once since I've been growing in this location. And my humidity sits in the 60s, 70s, sometimes in the 80s into flower. Because the microbes are there to balance everything. It's a magical thing, man. Nature's crazy.
Oh, I definitely could see myself going full tilt at some point, having the bokashi going, some earthworm containers as well, and trying to recycle. I honestly thought I would have been closer to that this year than I actually was able to achieve. But I'm not a quitter by any means. So hopefully this time next year, I've opened up a lot more of those stores.
I mean, even step into the earth box is huge, man. One day at a time, one step at a time. I feel like when we try to go full send into some of this stuff, it can get really overwhelming very quickly, especially with like the size of what you're doing and the people that you're taking care of, right? Like you have a certain product that you're trying to quality that you're trying to maintain for these patients. So, I mean, that's important as well. And taking it slowly, I think the way that you're doing it, just being mindful about the inputs, I think that's smart. And I think just over time, it'll slowly continue. Because you've already opened that rabbit hole, man. There's no coming out of it at this point.
I don't think so. I tell you one thing, and when I got the the earth boxes there, Brandon Russ sent, Brandon and Smiley sent some of his bokashi over, and I added some of that to their boxes, and then I had a bunch left over, so I was getting a little cocky with it. and I threw some in with my cocoa. And I was using the cocos. I was using a grow it cocoa, and I'm telling you that it was chips. It wasn't like a powder. It was a chunky chips. I've always liked a nice aerated medium. Trying to keep those roots as healthy as I can. I've always been pretty good at it, but again, soils change things. But when I threw that bokashi down on the cocoa chips, and it was a fresh batch. I was reusing the cocoa more for a few runs. I would give it a rinse and reuse it. So cocoa was almost a little bit more self-sustaining for me because I did use it a few runs. Then when it got fine to like a dirt, that's when I actually got rid of it. Once it got kind of where it'd be choking itself out, that's when I get rid of it. I had just put together a new batch of the chunky chips and planted in there and threw some of that bokashi in on the top of that. By the end of that run, that bokashi had broke down that cocoa to where it was looked like it had been on its third run. And it was just like nothing left to it. It was all like super powdery and fine. I couldn't believe how much that stuff had just got in there and kicked that cocoa's butt.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's it's the power of those microbes, man. That's crazy. And I feel like for that system, you're probably like, damn it, I could have gotten a couple runs out of this if I wouldn't have used this. So I can kind of see like that double-edged sword piece of how that, could impact your bottom line, right? If you're having to use more cocoa because you broke down too quickly. And did you notice any difference in the plant expressions or difference when you use something like that in the cocoa?
Yeah, it was most definitely a better run. I did see the power of it though. That was the difference is I could see the power of how quickly it could break down materials and make it more plant.
Yeah.
Not saying that's what it did by breaking the cocoa down, but that showed me the power of what it could do, and it definitely raised an eyebrow at the end.
Yeah.
Stuff.
So, I mean, here's an idea, man. Like with all of your leaves and stuff, throw them into a bukashi bucket and let the bukashi basically break all that stuff down in a bucket for you. And then once you have that pulp, take that pulp, bury it in your old soil, and let it break down even further and let it turn into soil. Mix that thing up and boom, let it rock.
Maybe try that. Maybe try that. It's an easy enough one I could probably do in the house. Just keep it a little smell proof. I may try that.
Bukashi doesn't. That's the nice part about bukashi though is that bukashi won't that it'll lactic acid bacteria will neutralize smell. So you'll smell like a little bit of a ferment, but that's it. It's not heavy. It's not. It's not crazy. Like for instance, I'm in an apartment and I have a bucket with food waste that will sit, and as we're kind of cooking and things like that, we'll throw all of our food scraps in there, throw some bukashi or spray it with labs, and I mean it has a smell to it, but it doesn't smell bad. It doesn't smell putrid. It doesn't smell like something's funky's growing on it. It just has like this like fermented smell, right? Like even kombucha has a smell to it, type of thing. So
So how we doing on time, man? I know, remember in the beginning you said
say
and
I got about 10 minutes. Yeah, so we can start wrapping up. I don't know if there's like I know we're live, right? On YouTube or something? Yeah.
yeah, 50 of them, 50 people watching currently, kind of hanging out,
Yeah.
chat, listening.
I don't know if you have any questions for me or if anybody else has any questions for me. I'd be happy to. I guess I'm kind of curious, like what made you want to reach out to me to be on here?
Well, I'm always looking for great people in the cannabis community to spotlight and bring more and more knowledge and growth styles into the community. As the more people come out, the more styles people see, they can see that there isn't one set method, that different things work. And if there's certain things that another grower is doing that they can then incorporate in their grow, then yeah, you know, again, more one method works. But moreover, it's try to show people that there is still a lot of great people in the community out there. When I look through the Instagram and I see some amazing work and whatnot, I like to see what they're about. Cannabis is deeper than the images that we see on Instagram. You know what I mean? There's great people that work behind those pictures, and I try to just bring them out. This show is basically I don't know if you've taken a look at some of the shows, but this is how things work around here. I try to reach out and find some great folks like yourself that are very passionate about their growing and their growing experience. Reach out to them, try to spotlight them a little bit, show everybody what they're about, what they're doing, and then three aspects of what you'll see on the channel. That's the spotlight, what we're doing here, and then when the shows don't go full term, which is 11:30 to 4:20, then I pick up and take off with what we now call the Weed Nerd World. And Weed Nerd World is like a panel show of growers or past guests. You have to be a past guest to join in the Weed Nerd World. So it's phase two. Anytime you see any, from now on, this applies to you. The Zoom link that you were sent is always good for the show. Anytime now, fourth, you see Weed Nerd Monday evenings are guaranteed a Weed Nerd World. Any other night when the guest doesn't necessarily take me to that 4:20 mark, soon as we're done, I'll take a quick break and then I'll fire up the Weed Nerd World. And then anybody past guests is welcome to join. No invitation needed. You turn on and see what we're talking about, a subject matter that, hey, pop on. You know, be part of the chat, dump some knowledge on us, have some fun, basically get to know some of the other growers in the community. And then the other part of this channel that you'll see is the organic takeover with Smiley's Gardens that I referred to earlier on. He's the one that's kind of pushes the deeper side of the organics around here. And once a month, he does the organic takeover, which started basically when the earth boxes came in. The takeover kind of started on the channel. So
Yep.
once a month, he talks straight soil. He talks to a lot of people that are in the regenerative soil circles there, the conferences, and tries to, you know, put more knowledge out there about good, healthy soil practices and all that good stuff. And, you know, hopefully you check that out as well. But that's what happens here. So from now on, everybody's said great things about you tonight, and hopefully you enjoyed your time here. Hopefully you start participating a little bit more in chat, watching. Most of the time, if you look back at this episode or you check out any other live episodes, you'll notice that everybody that takes part of here it's kind of family like. Once you come in, we greet you with a warm welcome. We kind of know your name. If you any show, you'll see the first 10 minutes is like everybody hello, 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 back and forth. And then from then on, they do their thing. They chat about the show. They chat amongst themselves. Sometimes chat in itself is its own entity, but it's a lot of fun. A lot of great people hang out here, so hopefully you can take some time, join in from time to time. We greatly appreciate it. It's always nice to get a different opinion, different perspective on things. So uh yeah, just always trying to find great people to bring in deeper to this cannabis community that we've got here. You've been no exception. So thank you for your time, man. I greatly appreciate it. And I hope that you do take me up on coming and hanging out a little bit more.
Well, I forwarded the link to my email address so that way I can save it, and I'll definitely have to check it out for future. This was cool, man. This was fun. I appreciate you having me on here. That's crazy, man. You run this till 4 a.m. Like that's insane. Yeah.
This is 511 episodes. I think I did 350 some before I even thought about taking a break, consecutive days. And yeah, out of this 511, I think I may have like 30 days, 30 nights off, something like that, and within that time span. But you know, 500, 511 spotlights, and then there's probably another 300 to 400 wormhole We Nerd World episodes as well.
It's cool, man. Yeah, I'll have to check that stuff out and kind of see when you guys do it, and maybe I'll pop in from time to time for a little bit before it gets too late for me. I tend to go to bed early, so yeah. So I'll have to check that out, man. But this was a great time, man. I really enjoyed my time, and appreciate you reaching out to me and us being able to reschedule and things like that, and being able to share a little bit about what I do. And hopefully next time I'll be able to show you guys what my flowering plants look like once I get my things up and running. So
I'm very grateful that you took me up on that reschedule too, by the way. One last thing I'd like to get from you before we head out, and that's I do this thing called the soundbite. Basically, it will be a commercial for your episode at some point. It's a little like station identification like they do on the radio stations. Basically, my version of it would be like, hey, this is Eagle. I'm on fucking Talking Shit with Eagle, episode 511. You can put anything you want before or after that, your Instagram, your website. I don't even care as long as it's got that in the body of it. I'll be ready now. You muted.
all right. So I'm on him. So it's this mindful grower, mindful rooted, on here talking shit with Eagle. And yeah, go ahead and check me out. And thanks for having me.
Nice. Thank you, my friend. I greatly appreciate your time. I cannot repay you for it, but it was well worth it on my end. That's for sure. And
Definitely,
again,
man.
thank you for your time and service. Thank you for being a good person. Moreover.
Awesome, man. Appreciate it. Well, I hope you have a wonderful night, man, and enjoy the rest of your show.
You too. Thanks again. For the rest of you guys, thank you for joining us. Hopefully you'll follow through into the weed nerd world. If not, thank you for your time and hanging out right now. You guys know the deal. Random acts of kindness do save lives. I'm a living, breathing example of that. I love what I do. I'll see you guys in a few, possibly maybe half hour. That being said, I'm out of here, guys.